Hey guys, you're watching The Hungry Handgunner. We're going to talk about some of the most toxic things about the gun community. Now before I get started, I just want to go ahead and address one of the elephants in the room, which is namely going to be that somebody somewhere is going to say, hey man, we should keep this to ourselves. The infighting is bad and it's going to give the enemies ammunition to use against us. Well, are they likely to be watching my channel? Probably not. Number two, well, I don't know of a better way to communicate these points. The other thing we'll get into is why am I bringing this up? What experiences or qualifications do I have? Well, I've been working at a gun shop now for 9 months-ish, and I've heard a lot of this stuff. I've seen a lot more of it. And then, of course, there is the ever-present social media thing, dealing with different groups and people and mindsets and outdated and just bad, incorrect information. So we're going to be going over a little bit of that today. So, yeah, enjoy this. For starters, let's go over gear. Now, if you're into motorcycle riding at all, bear with me, you've no doubt heard the term AT-GAT. All the gear, all the time, right? So in shooting, you kind of have the same thing, except instead of safety gear like helmets, pants, boots, gloves, jacket, and that sort of thing, a lot of the times it's, well, stuff like this, right? So this is my SIG M18. I have a loophole Delta Point Pro red dot on it and a flashlight. This is the TLR 7 sub, and this is what I have been carrying. So are these things strictly necessary? Well, in my opinion, the light is definitely a good idea. Will the gun function without it? Sure. Are there people that have successfully defended themselves without using a weapons light or a red dot? Sure. Are there people that have survived motorcycle crashes without wearing a helmet or a jacket? Sure. These things are pieces of gear, pieces of kit, whatever you want to call it, that, well, they give you an edge. They can if they're used properly. So there's two schools of thought though when it comes to stuff like this. There's people that will buy an M18, leave it bone stock and carry it, and that's all you need, right? Irons don't have batteries. They won't fail. They can and do, but they don't have batteries per se. But they can fail. They can fall off the gun. They can break. If you have fiber optic inserts, those can fall out. So there you go. That's an argument you frequently hear about red dots. Flashlights will give away your position. Well, maybe if you're out in the middle of a field and you're using that light to navigate around or whatnot, then, well, yeah, if you're in a situation in which there's an enemy, 100 plus yards away, then they could. In the confines of your own home or in a self-defense encounter out in the real world, I guess they could, but then again, if you're using it properly, they're also making sure that you don't shoot somebody that doesn't need to be shot, which could, well, very well keep you out of prison. So, worth it to me. But there's people that will say if you don't have this stuff, you're going to get killed in the streets. Maybe, maybe not. But where I'm going with this is this all or nothing attitude, right? If you have a red dot, it's because you can't shoot. Not true. If anything, the red dots made it easier for me to shoot irons, and I've heard that from several other people. If I have the light, it's because tactical. No, I made a pro versus cons thing, and well, the pros definitely outweighed the cons for me, so I went with the light. By the same token, especially talking to older generations before things like this became accessible, before weapons lights were this kind of form factor that you could reasonably conceal them, maybe it's hard to adapt to change, and it's not just with gun stuff, it's with everything else. So do I still think that the weapons light, for instance, well, even if you're old-fashioned, does it still make sense? Sure I do. The key is going to be approaching that discussion from a point of good intent, right? A bit of empathy, a bit of understanding. Hey, things are changing maybe rapidly for people a couple generations ahead of us. So it may be a little bit more nuanced conversation than, hey, idiot, put a light on your gun and stay out of jail. Or, hey, idiot, red dots have come a long way. It's all about how you talk to people. So the all or nothing mindset gets kind of tricky. Again, that doesn't mean that you have to give up your earnestly held positions, especially if, well, they're backed by repeatable objective standards like, well, shot times. Does the red dot actually make you shoot faster? In the hands of somebody that's practiced with the dot, yes, it does. And that's really, that debate's kind of over. And I'll link to some videos I've done with the does the red dot make a difference, both using a gun with and without the dot? Same gun too. Also, kind of in keeping with that theme of things changing, back in the day, women couldn't vote, etc., etc. You get the drift here. Back in the day, a man would choose what was best, if anything, for a woman to use to fight with or shoot or whatever. Well, kind of past that. And as somebody that sells guns, is trying to get the best tool to fit the needs of that particular customer, when you have a very overbearing husband, fiance, father, brother, whatever, that is unwilling to let the woman have any say-so in that, well, number one, I've heard enough where he bought this for me and I don't like it. Fellas, if your goal is for your lady of whatever relationship to not only learn to shoot that gun well, but also carry it, it's going to be important that she enjoys well shooting it and carrying it. And nobody's going to be able to tell her that more than, well, her. Now, I know somebody somewhere is going to say, well, she has no experience and I have all the experience in the world. Cool. Steer. You know, like, okay, maybe you don't want her to get a Bursa or a Charter Arms. Maybe you want to steer her towards a Smith & Wesson or a Glock or a Beretta or a CZ or a SIG. That's fine. Steer her in that direction and then let her decide from there. Maybe the ergonomics that work great for you, like a M18, don't work that well for her. Maybe the P365 will work better. Conversely, maybe you want to steer her to a smaller gun, but she really likes the way that the P320X Compact or the Glock or the CZ, if I stick with certain manufacturers, guys, I like them all. I'm just giving you examples. Maybe she likes something that you wouldn't have even thought she would like. For instance, my wife likes the Glock 19X, would not have seen that coming. That's what she likes, so that's what she's got. I'm not really telling you how to live your life here. This is just things I've seen. And if you let your wife be involved more in that process and let that be her decision, I think you guys are going to have a lot better turnout with terms of her shooting the gun, practicing with it, and even carrying it than you would if you say, no, by God, this is what I got you. Well, when she doesn't like that and she's not carrying it and you're harping about her carrying, she says, I'm not going to carry that gun. I don't like shooting that gun, whatever. You know, when you go trade it in, if you guys have done any buying, selling, trading with guns, it doesn't normally work out well to just keep flipping them, right? Unless you got a crazy awesome deal, in which case I'm happy for you. So to save you some pain and maybe even decrease my sales a little bit at the shop, there is that. Let it be her decision. You guys ever run into that phenomenon where you've heard something or said something so many times that you just believe that's what it is, and then, well, you're wrong? Ran into that not too long ago with a buddy of mine. I'm going to leave his name out of it so I don't roast him too hard. But he said something about, I heard an old Lift Bizkit song. And I said, say that again? He said, Lift Bizkits. You know, the band. I said, I've heard Limp Bizkit, but never Lift Bizkits. He said, well, I heard one of those songs come on the radio. My first thing was my condolences, because it wasn't a particularly good band when they were popular. And, well, yeah, you get the drift. But he, for so long, had heard Lift Bizkits instead of Limp Bizkit. That's what he thought he would have bet money. He even said, I would have put $100 that I was right. So over time, you hear these things and they become reinforced maybe through his perception of the fact that he had said that and nobody had ever corrected him, so on and so forth. But especially with firearms advice, when you hear something, particularly if it comes from a place of authority, like maybe your dad or your grandpa or that nice old man that cuts your hair and you've known him forever, sometimes you hear that, and if it doesn't get corrected, then it becomes concreted as fact, when that may not be the case. So 22's bouncing around. I hear it at least 2 or 3 times a week. Sometimes I'm able to correct it, and sometimes people storm off angrily because I'm just an idiot that doesn't know anything, which may be true, but in this case, it's not. The 22 long rifle does not bounce around, so we'll go ahead and cover that. If you shoot targets out here, the bullet may deflect, and I've covered this before, I think in my futtery video. There'll be links in the description if you want to check that out. The bullet may deflect, so if it hits a bone or something like that, it may move. But it doesn't ping pong ball around there like freaking flubber, just tearing up everything. It wasn't picked by the mafia as their assassination weapon of choice because it zipped around and made mush out of the brains. It was most likely because it was a quiet gun and it was used at contact distance. So it had nothing to do with the flubber-like qualities of a round, because it just doesn't happen. Most 22 long rifle rounds are soft lead that might be plated with just a freaking thin coating of copper. They don't typically have jackets, so it's a very soft projectile that tends to deform, and if it moves from a hard impact like bone, it doesn't move that far, and if it does move, it's losing a lot of the energy. So to think that it's just zipping around in there like a never-ending Newton's cradle effect is just not going to happen. So stop saying that. Oh, don't modify that gun because the that prosecutor, man, they'll throw you in the pen. They'll rip you apart. Modify the gun. Well, I think we need to talk about that right now. Modify and make it fully auto? Sure, valid argument. Putting a light or a red dot, or even Cerakoting it, putting a custom backplate on your Glock or your dust cover on your AR. There's zero evidence that that's true, right? There's no case law to back that up. There's nothing that says if I put this red dot on here or this light, there's no example where that has been the deciding factor in a justified or not justified verdict on a shoot. So there is that. And the other thing is, for any argument that could be made against the red dot or the light in this case by an overzealous prosecutor, well, a moderately skilled attorney, even remotely versed in gun knowledge, should be able to articulate, or you should be able to articulate, why you have those things on there. I have the light on here so that I can positively ID the threat. That meant that at the time of the shooting, especially if the light was employed, I knew based on X, Y, and Z that I observed by using the light that that person was a deadly threat. The red dot sight grants me better accuracy, especially under things like stress, especially under less than ideal shooting circumstances, increased heart rate, tunnel vision, things like that. The red dot gives me a single point of aim, and there's a lot of good resources on what these pistol red dot, and there are a lot of good resources on these micro red dot sights, and particularly how our brain engages with them versus traditional 3-dot sight setups or typical iron sights over on Sage Dynamics. I'm going to link to his channel and specifically to his white paper, if I can do so, in a much more eloquent and intelligent manner than I can convey here, why the red dot sight works better on pistols. Now again, if you don't want to shoot with a red dot sight, that's fine. I'm not telling you how to live your life. I'm just saying there is some very good arguments to be made for these that get stronger with each iteration of these sights and with their increased reliability. So it's something to consider. And again, I think that even a moderately skilled lawyer, even with a modicum of firearm knowledge, should be able to articulate why those modifications, if you will, don't equal, intent to kill or some bloodthirsty mindset. Now this next one's going to be a bit of a weird one to hear come from me, but we need to be careful with gun YouTube or social media influencers or personalities. And yes, even myself, I had to walk back a almost year-long endorsement of Olight products because they were just as good and worked for me. Until they didn't, and I felt bad because I had profited off of people buying those lights using the links that I had, because Olight sent them to me. I got commission, and all I can do is say, and hopefully you believe me, but with the utmost honesty, that the lights were working, and I had my holsters molded for them. I was carrying these lights, and they did work for a while. It wasn't until I became more educated on weapons lights and started experiencing failures with Olight that I had to walk that back. And it's not a good spot to be in, and it's one I hope I'm never in again. But what I'm saying is just be careful. And I don't mean to pat myself on the back here, but not every content creator or influencer or whatever is going to come back around and say, hey guys, I was wrong, I'm sorry. It weighed kind of heavy on me that people had spent their hard-earned money off of what I had said. However few of them, I'm not claiming to be, Garand Thumb or anything like that, but people had still made a purchase based off the information that I had put out there in the endorsement that I had given. That wasn't something I was sticking with, and I felt like I owed it to the community to explain, hey, I'm moving away from this and I can't recommend them anymore, and offer an apology to people that had made that purchase based off of my recommendation. Where I'm going with this is just be mindful how vetted is that gear that person's recommending. Know that there are often a lot of financial incentives to clicking those links down in the description to take you to purchase products. I'm not saying don't do it, I'm saying be knowledgeable going in. If you trust the personality that's telling you that, then that's a win. And there's several good ones out there. But if you don't, or if you have reason to believe that maybe because maybe some things had come to light or whatnot, that person's being less than honest with you about the process that they had put that product through for their review or endorsement or whatever, well, let it give you pause, because there's often a lot of financial incentive for you to go buy that light using their link. So just have all the information available to you before you do that. I'm not going to sit here and say that there won't ever be affiliate links in my description. There will be. You guys know how YouTube monetization works, likely by now, with gun content. It can be kind of a rough place to make money from ad revenue and things like that. And fortunately, I'm lucky to have patrons and channel members and things like that, and I try to thank them with their own special clip at the end of every video. But there are ways to make money using affiliate links, and if it's a product I believe in, then I have no problem doing that. But just know that going in, that sometimes that financial incentive can blur the line between objectivity with a creator and, well, being profit focused. And I say all that to really just say this. In terms of toxicity in the gun community, and I know that's an overused word, right? You know, toxic masculinity, toxic conservatism, toxic whatever. But it does kind of hinder the growth as a whole of the shooting community and people's individual development as both shooters, whether it's for fun or competition or self-defense mindset, prepping, whatever. These things do kind of hinder that growth on an individual and communal level, so I'm going to call it toxic. But I say all that just to say that the appeal to authority with a lot of creators can get kind of out there, right? Like if you have a guy that's really just wants to focus on bullseye shooting, regardless of how I feel that maybe he needs to be focused on learning to carry appendix and all this stuff, and then telling him that, well, Grantham said that gun sucks. Chances are he may not know who Grantham is, and if he does, he may not care what he says, which I think is borderline blasphemy, but you get the drift. Or vice versa, right? And even my own issues that came up with a certain vintage shooting jacket wearing gun tuber largely are a preference thing, right? I think that in light of the information that we have, that things should be approached from a certain way. He doesn't feel that way, obviously. And I got under his skin a bit. But that's all behind us, at least as far as I'm concerned. The offer still stands if he ever wants to do a live stream or even just a phone call or, well, return an email. We could always chat and maybe reach some sort of resolution. The last point I'm going to touch on is kind of this false bravado, right? This, I'm so macho, you know, it won't hurt me to take another person's life if they're trying to hurt my family. Well, chances are it will. Chances are that the ramifications, both criminal, civil, and just morally and ethically, if you're a sound mental mind of knowing that you had to potentially end the life of another human, are going to weigh on you. And if they don't, well, it's kind of weird. But I think this whole pretending like everything's going to be just fine if you have to kill somebody in self-defense and, you know, you won't lose sleep a bit. No, you probably will. And there's no shame in admitting that. There's no shame in having an open and honest discussion about all the ramifications in the self-defense sphere. Not just the will I go to jail, but also talking about the civil suits that can arise from the person you shot's family, whether they live or die. Some people think, well, if you shoot them and they die, that there's not going to be any civil fallback because, well, dead men can't sue you. No, but their families can. And I think that by clouding the conversation with this false bravado, this false, just super macho attitude is really doing everybody a disservice. In the self-defense world, there's people that shoot that don't give a hoot about self-defense, and I'm not going to try to convince you otherwise here. I think that to be in that mindset, if you're legally in an area that allows you to carry, if you're in a country or state or whatever that recognizes your right to self-defense, and to not take at least weigh the merits of self-defense, I envy you. But anyway, I think we need to be having conversations about the full ramifications of the use of force in a use of force situation for self-defense. Criminal, civil, moral, ethical, psychological, philosophical, right? We all come from varying philosophical beliefs, be that Christian or pagan or atheist, but at the end of the day, we all have some sort of philosophical belief or religious belief that kind of dictates right versus wrong, good versus bad, all that stuff. And I think having those more nuanced conversations and kind of hearing from people that have been in those situations, if they're willing to talk about it, which again, I completely understand if people aren't, I think that's a net gain for the community as a whole. And to kind of cloud the waters with this I'm Rambo, I don't care attitude, I think is pretty toxic and does a disservice to a lot of people that are already kind of turned off by that. Now, I'm a bit of a nerd myself, so don't take offense to this if you fall in this category, but maybe the nerdy types that are wanting to carry a gun are already turned off by that. You know, maybe they didn't fit in with the jocks, and that sort of attitude carrying over and now into adulthood kind of turns them off. I've heard that from people, this whole he-man, you know, I'm an alpha male, blah, 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 I only drink Black Rifle coffee. That whole bro vet alpha bull crap kind of turns a lot of people off. And really, well, you don't need to have that attitude or be that type of person to carry a gun. I'd say that far more people carry a gun every day that don't fit in that box than do. So if we could cool it with that and just remember that everybody gets on this ride at different points, right? It's kind of like a bus or a train, right? There's different stops. You may have been on this bus or train since you were 5 years old. Somebody else may be just getting on that bus or train at 65. So patience, and it's something, again, this is just as much a reminder for myself that I will see for posterity's sake than anything else, but just patience with people, trying to understand where they may be coming from, listening to understand instead of to reply. It's all good stuff, and I think that if we do that, we'll create a better 2A community for not just our kids, but our grandkids' kids as well, and it'll bring more people into the fold, which is a net win for us in the long haul, in my opinion. So that is what it is. Some folks are going to discount this as just millennial Zen, whatever, chakra BS, but this is my honestly held beliefs that if we take a step back and take ego out of the equation, just like we should for day-to-day self-preservation, right? Like staying out of fights, not letting somebody appeal to your ego and bait you into a conflict. It's my belief if we can do the same in discussions with one another, that we'll have a more unified, a more conducive environment for learning and things like that. So that's really all I have to say on that. So if you watch some of my older videos before all this came to light, please cut me some slack. And going forward, please don't hesitate to remind me of this video if the situation arises and it warrants it. So drop your thoughts in the comments. Guys, stay safe. Keep shooting. As always, a super huge thank you to my channel members and Patreon members. You guys rock. Your support means the world to me. It makes it a lot easier to get out here and do this. I appreciate it. Every dime that you guys send in gets turned right back around to the channel, whether that's camera side of things or gun side of things with making sure I have ammo and all that good stuff. I appreciate you guys. So always links in the description if you want to do that. Never feel like you have to. All right, guys, I'll see you next time.